Hope Was Here, by Joan Bauer. Chapter 4. G.T. Stoop had a toothpick in his mouth and a mess of eggs on the grill. He had just folded over 3 cheddar omelets with bacon and had a strip steak sizzling next to a fat slab of ham. Addie and I were standing behind him in the big galley kitchen next to a huge pot of simmering onion soup that was making me hungry, even though I just stuffed myself beyond good sense with chocolate chip pancakes. A pale waitress with carrot top hair called in a short stack, which is restaurant speak for a small order of pancakes. G.T. Stoop shook seasoned salt on the steak, put it on a plate with eggs, beans, and a side of cornbread, dinged a bell, put the order up by the galley window, and shouted, "Come get this miracle breakfast, Florence, before I eat it myself." Flo, our waitress from last night, shouted across the room, "G.T., back off that man's plate and behave yourself." He grinned, wiggling his toothpick. "I'm not so good at that." He had a big, deep voice. "Lord, don't I know it." Flo was at the galley window now, getting her order. She put the plate in front of a big man sitting at the counter. G.T. Stoop threw his spatula up in the air and caught it. "Eat that, Carl, and go do something significant with your day." Carl raised his fork and knife happily, already chewing. Everyone was laughing and eating. I sure didn't feel like I was in the presence of a person who had cancer. It was 6:30 a.m., the best time to see a diner because, as Addie always said, if the place isn't humming by then, the word hasn't gotten out yet. Welcome Stairways was humming. G.T. Stoop poured pancake batter on the griddle. He was medium height, bean thin, with a square, gentle face, and totally bald. He had deep, blue eyes that shone behind the wire rims perched on the end of his nose. He was wearing jeans, work boots, and a blue shirt with the cuffs rolled above his elbows. No apron. Addie always wore an apron. He was moving with the rhythm of the short order dance. Popped 4 pieces of bread in a toaster, slipped onions onto the side of the grill, poured batter into a waffle iron. "I love the morning best," he said, smiling. "You waitress before?" I looked her smack in the eye. "I've got 18 months experience waitressing in the best diner in Brooklyn, New York, and before that, counter or tables," Llewellyn interrupted. She had a pinched-together face. "Both. How busy did it get?" "They'd be standing out in a line on the weekends, and I couldn't go to the bathroom for 5 hours straight even if I had to. It was so jammed." "I've been waitressing 10 years, she snapped back. I didn't ask how long she could hold it. She layered 3 pancake platters on her left arm. I can carry 5. And headed off to a booth in the corner. Addie was examining a piece of blueberry coffee cake on a plate the way a scientist studies a petri dish. "We bake it ourselves here every morning," G.T. Stoop said proudly. "It sells pretty good." "Really?" Addie took her fork and cut through the center of the cake, flicked off some crumbs. I knew what she was thinking. Dry. She took a bite, chewed it slowly, no expression on her face. Addie tastes food the way some people play poker. "It's my mother's recipe," he added. "And I'm sure she is a fine, upstanding woman," Addie said, "but her coffee cake is dry." He looked up to the ceiling, laughed deep. "Lord, what have I done bringing this woman up here?" "I'm here," Addie replied, "so you can rest easy." "I don't expect that's gonna happen." He handed her a big chain of keys. "You keep this place running smooth, and I'll attend to other matters." Addie jingled them. "It'll be like a knife going through maple butter." Braverman stood to the side, studying the orders G.T. was cooking. G.T. raised his spatula. Braverman nodded, eyes on the grill. And like air traffic controllers changing shifts, G.T. moved from the grill, Braverman took his place, and he started flipping pancakes, turning bacon, frying eggs. Not one yolk was broken in the process. Flo was listening behind the counter. "G.T., you've been cooking up something for over a month. What is it?" "You'll find out tomorrow, Florence, after the parade." As parades go, it's pretty hard to impress a New Yorker. For my money, unless you've got huge Garfield and Big Bird balloons flapping in the wind 10 floors up, you don't call yourself a parade. You're a gathering. I wasn't much in the mood for a gathering. I'd been dragged here. Addie and I were standing on the corner of Pine and Megalyn Streets by Scolotti's World of Cheese, which was offering a 15% discount to all veterans for the 3-day weekend. People were lined 4 deep in the street. I was studying the Welcome Stairways menu so I wouldn't look like an amateur when I started work the next morning. Nothing can slow you up faster than not knowing the menu. "That's Dina's blood in you," Addie remarked. "She always knew the menu like the back of her hand." Mom is an overachieving waitress like me. In her last Christmas letter, she wrote that she'd been thinking about the decisions she'd made in life and felt that the best one had been to stay in waitressing. No matter what happens in the world, from war breaking out to computers taking over our minds and bodies, there's always going to be need for a good waitress who can keep the coffee coming and add up the check in her head. A mediocre band stumbled by. The Mulhoney High School Marauders, my new school. Purple and gold uniforms. I scanned their faces to find kindred spirits. It's hard to tell people's true nature when they're playing Sousa. Next, Vietnam vets in combat fatigues. World War II veterans rode behind them, waving flags. I applauded as they went by. Antique cars / scout troops / clowns / a happy float with happy farmers with a banner for the Real Fresh Dairy. Another float, red, white, and blue flags flapping, streamers streaming. A man in a red jacket and khakis waving to the crowd. Above him, a bold banner. Elect Eli Millstone for mayor if you care about Mulhoney. Some of the men I'd seen in the diner last night walked beside the float like bodyguards. A flurry of movement beside me. Braverman. He watched the Millstone float with angry eyes. He's been mayor for 8 years. Braverman said. Who's running against him? Nobody. He's too powerful. A plump, red-faced man in a law enforcement uniform shouted, Move it back, people! Move it back on the curb! The name above his badge read Sheriff L. Greaves. A harsh-looking man in a Millstone t-shirt was working the crowd, clapping his hands over his head. Let's hear it for 4 more years for Mayor Eli Millstone, the only choice for Mulhoney! Just about everyone was clapping except me, Addie, and Braverman. You're not clapping for the mayor, the man said to Braverman. That's right, Braverman shot back. The muscles in his neck stuck out when he said it. The man stared at him and eventually moved on. Then that man looked back and stared at me too. A shiver of fear went through me. Miss Pitty-Pat's tap-dancing darlings were arriving on the stage that was set up in the park off Grimes Square. There were about 12 children in black and yellow bumblebee costumes with bouncing antennae. They formed a questionable line and began their big number, which required intense concentration because in addition to tap-tap-tapping, they also had to sing, Hello, how are you? We're really glad to see ya. We really want to tell ya hello. I longed for Manhattan and the jazz fusion street band that played in Times Square. Addie and I stood by a white gazebo as the dancing darlings scurried off to frenzied applause. Mayor Millstone was master of ceremonies. His round stomach didn't move an inch when he laughed. To quote Shirley Polanski, head waitress at the Humdinger Diner, beware of a big man whose stomach doesn't move when he laughs. I think a Chinese philosopher said it first, but these things trickle down to the food service community. G.T. Stoop walked to the stage. Eli, I'd like to make an announcement. The mayor looked surprised. Well, sure thing, G.T. What about? I'll just say it once if that's okay. G.T. stood at the microphone, not talking, for the longest time. The sun beat down on his shiny head. I wondered what it was like to lose your hair. Afternoon, folks. People shushed their children. Most of you know what's going on with me, and some of you don't. I wouldn't be making a public announcement about it except for you needing to know what I'm planning to do. When I was diagnosed with leukemia earlier this year, I realized I couldn't stand at the short order grill for 10 hours a day anymore. I needed to get myself more of a desk job. He chuckled. So I've decided to run for mayor. A deep shock fell on the crowd. Eli Millstone's smile evaporated. I looked at Addie, who'd turned stone still. Now, I didn't put together one of those exemplary committees to tell me if I should do this. The way I see it, you're either open for business or you're not. But those of you who've stared down a thing like cancer know what happens when you get this kind of news about your health. At first, you can't believe it. After that, the fear gets pretty strong. I'm 54 years old. I never once felt the need to rush through life until now. Eli Millstone's eyes narrowed. I've learned things with this disease I never would have otherwise. Mostly I've learned how important it is to do the right thing, no matter who opposes you. He rubbed his hand over his bald head. I'm in this race to try to bring unity and fairness to our town. For my money, we have too many warring factions here. People who don't want the Real Fresh Dairy to expand any further. People who do. People who want better daycare for their families. People who don't. People who think the schools are just fine the way they are. People who are worried about the overcrowding. And what's happening if we've pulled off into our separate corners and nothing's getting done. We need to renovate that broken-down community center of ours and use it to draw people together again. We need to develop better daycare facilities for the families in this area because children are our future. We need to use more of our money to help the poor of Mulhoney get a leg up. We need to make sure our young people get jobs so that every single one of them who wants to can earn money for college. GT!
Eli Millstone was at his shoulder, face flushed. Those are sweet dreams, and I share everyone. Just how high are you suggesting we raise our good people's taxes to get the money to pay for all this? A ripple of worry hit the crowd. GT looked at the mayor. Eli, since you brought it up, here's my plan. The biggest company in town, the Real Fresh Dairy, hasn't paid any local taxes for 5 years and owes $750,000 in back tax revenue. I'd say collecting that money is a good place to start. People looked at each other and gasped. Millstone sputtered, I don't know what you're getting your information from, GT, but it's as bogus as a barking cat. I just went to the tax assessor's office, Eli. I had to search through some big computer printouts, but the facts are there for anyone to see. You're lying. No, sir. GT set his jaw. Our roads are cracking because dairy trucks are carrying loads heavier than our streets can handle. We have residents in the South End who can't sleep at night because those trucks are rumbling by their windows, taking illegal shortcuts to the interstate to save gas and time. I say we levy a fat fine against that business until they obey the law. We can use that money to fix the roads and help our people. Braverman let out a whoop and started clapping. Others joined him. Millstone's face had splotches of purple rage. He grabbed the mic. We are assessing the traffic flow situation in this town. GT, town business is a little more complicated than flipping burgers on a grill, which is what you've been doing for as long as I can remember. Oh, GT said, laughing. You learn courage and decision-making quick when you've got 24 burgers on the grill. People laughed good at that one. Braverman put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled loud. I wish I could whistle like that. Eli Millstone was working hard to overcome his irritation. His smile got bigger, his face muscles got stiffer. He grabbed the microphone and laughed deep. How about we stop wasting everyone's time with nonsense and start talking real issues? I'm running on my record. The Real Fresh Dairy has put this town on the map, folks, and I brought them here. Look around and see the progress. Is Mulhoney a bigger, more bustling place than it was 8 years ago? Have living conditions improved? Are there more jobs? Is there more business for our local stores? You bet your boots, and it will continue into my 3rd term and beyond. I'm mighty proud of my accomplishments. The men who were walking by Eli Millstone's float started applauding loudly. GT raised his voice. Let's not forget Mulhoney's family dairies that went out of business when the Real Fresh Dairy came to town. Millstone waved that off. If they'd been better managed businesses, they would have survived. Raising their property taxes sky high was what killed them. GT looked straight at him. Then the Real Fresh Dairy swooped down and bought their land cheap. You're living in la-la land, mister. The mayor motioned stiffly to Miss Pittypat, who shoved the Dancing Darlings on stage for an insect extravaganza number featuring Eensy Weensy Spider and Glowworm. Addie turned to me. GT Stoop's crazy as a loon. He's going to be dead in a month with all that stress. I gulped. GT walked off the stage and headed toward us. I think that went pretty well, he said, looking at Addie, who didn't speak. I'm sure glad you're here to run things, Addie, so I can go make a fool of myself in politics. Addie gave a slight nod. I wasn't sure if she was acknowledging her ability to run things or him being a fool. And GT Stoop strode smiling through the crowd that parted for him like the Red Sea did for Moses.